So sometimes finding the right answer is very confusing, and as teachers we know that students feel exactly the same way, sometimes when doing research in any type of subject area. That's because there are so many opinions out there to choose from, so finding information that is reputable and finding information that is something you actually want to use can be very difficult for students. So this is a really important issue that we are going to talk about, web evaluation. It's not about just finding information, it's also about evaluating and critiquing it, and most importantly, implementing that effectively in your own classroom. So what is web evaluation, first of all? Simply put, it's testing a website's credibility to provide quality and trusted information. And these are the same skills that students use to judge any material's trustworthiness. They are just now being addressed in an online context, of course. So just as much as they are assessing print material, they are now going to be assessing online material. Just because of the change in context doesn't mean skills are going to change. So they're going to be essentially assessing information, and this will be very important for their not only their academic life, but also their personal life. Students need to be able to assess the sources of any information in which they come in contact with. So that's also relevant to their future jobs. So why teach it explicitly? Why are we responsible to? Well, first of all, there's no more gatekeepers out there. The responsibility is now on the user's evaluation to determine the quality control of the resources that they're using, and research has shown this. Also now, 21st century skills are required standards for us to be incorporating into our classrooms every day, and those frameworks for learning and teaching really provide us with some outcomes that we need to make sure we are providing opportunities for the students to be able to use. Those include learning and innovation skills, which also include creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, communication, and collaboration, as well as those information, media, and technology skills, which would include information literacy and media literacy. The other really important area for us to focus on is avoiding plagiarism, and that doesn't mean just text or ideas, it also means images, and one of the great resources that we have access to as teachers and just members of the online community is something called Creative Commons. It's an area where content can be freely and legally used. It's licensed, and you can look up anything from songs to videos to academic material, and it's free and it's legal to use as long as it's being cited correctly. And one of the great resources that our district has access to is something known as Noodle Tools. And beyond that, it is also important to be thinking about how we're preparing our students for life after high school, and particularly the future use in the career area as well as the post-secondary education area. We obviously know that in colleges and universities it's very important for them to be looking at information in a very critical fashion, as well as thinking about how to cite it correctly. Careers also are another area. All of these different areas that are listed here for you are career areas in which students would need those types of skills. So it's not just in an education format, it's also in the real world as well. Beyond that, personal consumers of online information is who our students are going to be. And that is just thinking about their using information in all facets of life. Just some examples here: investing, home repair, mortgages, medical information. In the past, when people were looking for information on practically anything in their lives, they may have asked someone they knew. Maybe they would have gone to a library, would have gone to an area in the community where there was such information available. Now and in the future, people are more apt to be going online to find answers for these types of personal questions. So teaching students how to critically evaluate even those types of sources is also important. So ultimately, how can we teach it effectively in our own classrooms? Well, research indicates that there are 5 criteria that we should be employing to understand whether internet-based information is really something we should be using. And that is through accuracy, authority, objectivity, currency, and coverage or scope. So those are things that we actually have to cover when we're talking about this in class. So how can we practically do this? Well, there's one approach called the checklist approach. And that just is basically the idea of using a common vocabulary in all types of educational settings that we are responsible for in the district. And what we are implementing now is something called the 5 W's of website evaluation, which is Kathy Schrock's method of basically creating an annotation for any type of internet source. And she covers the 5 W's because it's something that students are fairly familiar with from K through 12. And this approach is so transferable to life and should be very simple. And she thinks about sources based on all those 5 W's. So who wrote the pages? Who's the expert? How do they have that authority? What are they saying? What's the purpose? What makes it easy to use? What makes it different from other sites? When was the site created? When was it last updated? Is it something that's up to date? Where does it come from? Who's sponsoring the site? And ultimately, why is this information important to me and what I'm trying to find out? Secondly, teach by example. Make sure that in your own presentations, in your own lessons, that you are, living your own creed. In your delivery of content, promote those peer-edited sources, compare information, corroborate information, check for accuracy. You should be teaching by showing them and modeling what you are actually trying to teach. Also explain why it's necessary. Students are very curious by nature. So explain why it's important that we do this, why they need to be doing it as well in the future. And then lastly, just be consistent in all subject areas. That's why we're really talking about this, is because we don't want students to be getting different information about what they should be doing when it comes to evaluating sources. We want it to be consistent from K through 12 and in all different subject areas. So, having similar expectations will really reinforce this for them. And speaking of that, it may seem tough to incorporate these kind of skills into your content area, but it's actually fairly simple, and there's a lot of resources out on the web for you to use and access. And obviously we're in a teaching community, so this should be something that we are sharing amongst our colleagues. So using some of the ideas from the 21st Century Skills website, we've just picked a couple of lessons. First of all, 4th grade art. So here's an idea. If you are an art teacher in the elementary area, students could create a multimedia presentation that illustrates and analyzes a variety of dance genres, which could include other cultures, and they would appropriately use and cite video clips that they download from the web, but they would have to assess whether these sources were credible by using those 5 W's. Another area would be 8th grade math, and an idea that we had found was working in groups. Students could compare the cost of different hybrid cars compared with other non-hybrid cars, by researching price, miles per gallon, and then at the same time factoring in gas prices while using those 5 W's about where they're getting all this information from. And they would use their math skills, their algebra skills, to then analyze and present their findings. And they could actually do this through something like a consumer report, which is practically something that they would possibly read as a consumer when they are an adult thinking of buying a hybrid or a non-hybrid car. So not only is it something that would go along with the content area of math, but it's also very replicable to a real-life situation. And lastly, 12th grade journalism. So English is one of those classes where this seems like it would be easily adaptable into the content, and there are various ways that you could go about doing this, but this is an idea from the 21st Century Skills website, and students could follow newspaper accounts of different stories using a log system, and basically this lesson is geared around bias and deciding through the 5 W's whether each source is reporting and different stories about the same issue would have bias or any kind of significant comparison in the reporting. So these are just a few ideas that we have come up with to be able to implement those types of skills that we think are necessary to move forward in the future. And please take a look at the references attached to this post so that you can look further into detail on this type of instruction in your own classroom.